All right, and with that, now we're going to get into our predictions for the NFC South. Obviously, not a lot of high expectations for this division this season. I think it's going to be a team that kind of backs their way into winning the division somewhat. I don't know if any of these teams are going to be dominant across the NFC, but starting at the top, I think that Tampa Bay, whatever you expect, you're going to have a great defense from Tampa Bay and Todd Bowles. He's going to field a good defense. He's done it every season that he's been a head coach, even dating back to those rough Sam Darnold teams with the Jets. He's always had a great defense. I think that having the quality of weapons that he's got is going to make life easy for Baker. And I think he's become more comfortable as he's settled into his surroundings. I thought once he became the guy in Cleveland, he was able to show out and play within himself and play with the moxie that got him to become the number one pick. And we're starting to see that again after a couple of seasons. Once Baker Mayfield is comfortable in his surroundings, he can play. And so we've seen that with Tampa Bay, and he's got a couple of great weapons, couple of top wide receivers in Godwin and Evans. And so I think that this team is going to be, like I said, I don't know if their roster is going to be able to compete with the top end of the NFC, but I think they're definitely going to be the best of this somewhat shallow division in the NFC South. I think the other favorite in this division are the Falcons, which this is a team with a lot of weapons, but I think they're just kind of like Tampa Bay, but watered down a bit in the sense that I think that Baker Mayfield is probably going to have a better season than Kirk Cousins coming off that Achilles injury. Lots of weapons around them, but I don't think that they have the defense that Tampa Bay has. I think that Tampa Bay will be able to grind out those wins against them in those integral games that are going to matter in that division. They had the opportunity to take a defensive playmaker in the draft with Dallas Turner or any of those edge rushers at 8, and they went with Michael Penix, which is probably going to be considered one of the biggest head scratchers until proven otherwise. It's going to be one of the biggest head scratchers in NFL draft history. And so I think that, when you have a roster that's built around a great offense and you've neglected adding quality pieces to that defensive side, I think it's going to come to matter when you have a team that does have a quality defense like the Buccaneers. But once again, defense can come and go with the injury of a great player. What were you going to say, Mike?
I was going to say I think that's going to be something that, unfortunately for the Falcons, it might rear its ugly head a couple times, this year, especially early on. I mean, we know Kirk Cousins. I mean, he loves to sling it, but when you sling the ball, you're prone to turning the ball over. And then at that point, it's like you said, Pat. You didn't address the defense in the draft. There are going to be holes there, and is that going to come rear its ugly head? Even though, they have so many dynamic playmakers on that offensive side. I don't think anyone can judge Drake London on, what he has been throughout his career so far, just based off the quarterback play that he's had. Bijan Robinson, that's going to be something completely different. And that's we go back to the days of when Kirk Cousins was playing with a young Dalvin Cook. He unlocked him into one of the best running backs in the league, even just based off the check down game, which, if you can make Kirk Cousins money throwing it to the flat, more power to you. But I think it's all going to come down to, is Kirk Cousins, obviously said the Achilles, are they going to be able to score enough points to make up for any kind of glaring issue on the defensive side? And that's kind of why I like Tampa Bay to come out of this division. And like you said, Pat, I like the Falcons 9.5 under in wins, just based off what we were talking about. Obviously, if you can score enough points, you can win any game. But it's still Kirk Cousins. He's coming off that Achilles, and we'll see. We've seen it happen, and it's always been his Achilles heel going into those big games. We've heard it multiple times about his record in those prime time games. Falcons might be in a few of those this year, and is he going to be able to stand up? Also, coming off, that Achilles injury, if, mobility is going to be an issue and, God forbid they get pressure, what's going to happen?
So I'm actually going to push back from that. I have the Atlanta Falcons over 9.5, and Tampa Bay actually under 7.5 wins. I looked at it from the perspective of Atlanta. It has the easiest schedule in the NFL this year. Last year's opponents had 453 winning percentage last year. I do think Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix together will finish the season out. Because last year that quarterback play was awful.
What does that look like? What does them finishing the season together look like? Is it going to be Michael Penix getting like mop up duty in a blowout?
Yeah,
how are
I
they
do
do
think
that?
Kirk is probably going to have to miss some time. I don't see him making it a full year off an Achilles tear. But personally, I'm a fan of Michael Penix in Atlanta. I like the skill players around him. I like the offensive line around him. And more than anything, he has the ability to rely on a significant run game. Last year, they were one of two teams with two running backs that got 125 plus touches last year. They added Jace McClellan from Alabama. I think they can still, if they choose to, run the ball as much as they did last year. And they were actually, I believe it's pass rate over expectation. They were the worst team in the league. So they're going to pick up the passing game very quickly. On the defensive end, I think that's where all of our questions lie in. There's not a whole lot of talent just off first glance, but I do think Jesse Bates is elite. And I think having a weak division and having the weakest schedule in the league is going to help them a lot. But I do think they're over. I have them over at like 10 wins, and I have Tampa at 7 wins. Tampa Bay, to me, does feel like a great defensive team with great tackles, maybe even the best pair of tackles in the NFC. I think that's helped Baker Mayfield. I think that helped him more than anything last year. I just don't know realistically what they do defensively against certain teams. I think they just have really bad mismatches. I see a matchup with the Raiders, a matchup with the Chargers. Those are at the end of the year. I get that the Falcons play those teams too. I just do not feel that they're going to have the stability or the sustainability to make it all the way through. But those are my two top teams in this division. We could talk about New Orleans a little bit if you want.
We could touch on New Orleans and Carolina.
Well, we could touch
Carolina.
We could touch on New Orleans and Carolina by going like this. So, I mean, you talk about the quarterbacks in that division. It's Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, Bryce Young. It's going to be Tampa Bay or Atlanta coming out of there as the number one seed, coming out of the NFC South. And, Pat, do you see it happening with Bryce Young and Dave Canales in their first year? I think they did they beefed up on a lot of, dynamic playmakers, but I just think there's way too many questions still with the Panthers for them to, eclipsing 4.5 wins in that kind of division when you're going to be playing the Falcons twice and the Bucks twice and the Saints. No matter what they're going to look like, I think Derek Carr is still a serviceable enough quarterback, and you still have Cam Jordan anchoring down what is an above average defense. I don't see Carolina getting above 4.5.
See, here's my thing with Bryce Young is that the way you help a rookie quarterback succeed is not by trading away his top wide receiving target. You just don't do it. They set him up for failure last season. If the Panthers put Bryce Young in a position where he, on his own merits, is allowed to succeed or fail, then I will feel like the Panthers have done him right or have given him a chance. But right now, I'm throwing up my Justin Fields flag. The Panthers have done Bryce Young wrong. He can't succeed in the situation they put him in, especially last season. You can't rely on Adam Thielen as your number one wide receiver in 2023. You just can't. You can't expect anything else other than failure with those lack of weapons. You see the additions they've made. They've built on the offensive line. They've spent a ton of money on some guards, which, you do need great guard play in order to keep your quarterback upright. But they've also been able to spend some capital on some other weapons. You got Deontay Johnson. And so he'll have a better chance to prove himself this season. I do also like Xavier Legette quite a bit. He should be entertaining. I'm excited to see him play. There's more to the Panthers this year than last year. And the Bama fan in me hopes that the Panthers can roll over 4.5 wins. But the Bears fan doesn't, because I want their second-round pick to be high.
I think some of that optimism comes from the fact that, it's going to be Dave Canales calling the plays next year, and this is the same guy who kind of was behind the, resurgence, be it of, Baker Mayfield last year. And, we saw him, being able to get out of the pocket. And he's not the biggest guy in the world either. You're talking about Bryce Young. They were able to get him out in space and use his athleticism to get the ball upfield. And, they have Deontay Johnson. They do have Xavier Legette now, who, I think we've seen so far in camp as a guy who can stretch the field and at least go up and get the ball. And I think if, those kind of playmakers, it is make or break, just like you said for Bryce Young. But I think he is in a position of he's in a much, much better position than he was last year when he was just kind of thrown to the wolves. And we'll see how protection holds up. But it's
that defense is respectable still.
Good. The defense is,
yeah. I think the pieces are there on the defense. The coaching is there. Evero was a sought-after coordinator. I think that the pieces are in place for this team to certainly improve on being the worst team in the NFL, but to at least improve from being the bottom of what may be the worst division in football, because I have a lot of question marks on the Saints roster construction. I think that this is the chickens coming home to roost. You've got Derek Carr, an aging quarterback, a declining quarterback, with a team that does not have that much upside, in cap hell at the moment. My optimism with the Panthers is strictly based in this division is strictly based on my pessimism in the Saints.
Yeah. So the only real thing that I want to make note about the Panthers is I think Derek Brown is a top 10 player at his position in the NFL. Just want to shout him out. And then I think J.C. Horn, he's one of my favorite cornerbacks in the NFL. I think he's a top 10 cornerback in the NFL.
Wow.
I do. He hasn't played enough games, obviously, to deserve it. But I think if he can sustain a 16, 17 game season, I think he is a top 10 caliber corner in the NFL.
Put a pin in that. Put a pin in that for the Billboard podcast.
It really doesn't mean anything if Carolina can't get anything going on offense. I love what they did this offseason, adding Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, guard spots they needed. They need to keep him upright. They need to keep Bryce Young upright. Fan of Xavier Legette. I don't think we're going to see as much production as we're hoping for in year one. I do think he's still just got some time to develop and learn schemes and stuff like that. But I'm a big fan of Deontay Johnson in fantasy this year. Adam Thielen had 103 receptions last year. I think Deontay's going to get a lot of targets because just off what we saw last year from Bryce Young.
Bryce Young can get it to him. He can get it to a wide receiver if they're open.
And my biggest concern basically with this team for the next 3-4 years is going to be their left tackle. I was extremely high on him last year. I believe Ikem Ekwonu. He is pretty much the franchise guy that they need to move forward. If he doesn't improve or show us something, This year, I think that really almost kills the run for him.
Mm-hmm.
If in a
Doesn't
sense.
bode well for Bryce Young, that's for sure.
Yeah,
I think it was a very telling statement to bring in guys like Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt, just like you were saying, and paying them the kind of money you're going to be paying them to tell Bryce Young, you're the guy we want.
Right.
We want you to figure this out. We brought in the pieces on the offensive end of it for you to get the ball downfield, but also to have the time now to actually do it. And we haven't even touched on Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, who I think might be the lead back, coming out of there. That's another dynamic playmaker that is going to, open up this offense that, obviously had all the growing pains that we saw last year. But I think in terms of the position that they put him in, he could not be in a better position. And with a head coach like Dave Canales to, at least get something dynamic going on offense. I mean, we saw last year that the team really couldn't move the ball downfield whatsoever. And now you got guys like Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen isn't your number one wide receiver going into the year. I mean, I think there is optimism in Charlotte going into it, but like you said, it's all going to come down to the quarterback play. I think the defense is solid and going to hold up. And I mean, J.C. Horn is one of the best corners in the league, I think.
Yeah,
just quick analysis. Is there any? Okay, no, go ahead.
No, yeah, I agree. And just going on the Jonathan Brooks point, just wanted to say he is expected back by week 3 or 4. If you want to keep an eye on him for maybe fantasy football.
No, definitely. I was curious though of what for the NFC South bottom dwellers. Do we got Panthers or Saints? Who do we think's better? Because I'm going Panthers. I'm putting my pin in that for the Bulletin Board podcast.
No,
Mike, it's okay, Christian. Well, it's on you. Spotlight's on you.
I think the Saints are better. I mean, Ryan Ramczyk is going to miss the year, so that hurts a lot, losing him at right tackle. But I do think there's still a lot of talent on this team, despite subpar quarterback play. I think Chris Olave is elite. I was a huge fan of A.T. Perry last year, huge fan of him in college. So I think there's a lot of talent here. But the offensive line seems, losing Ryan Ramczyk is always going to hurt. But the defense has not changed. Paulson Adebo, he was another guy I also had as a top 10 corner this year. And is he cornerback 1 or 2 for the Saints? We don't know.
I think Lattimore.
Exactly. So yeah. I think with Adebo, with Lattimore, they just drafted your boy Kool-Aid. Of course. I think it's a talented team. I think it's still a talented team. Tyrann Mathieu. I mean, my God, he's still doing.
He's still out there. He's still out there doing. And I mean, they're tied for easiest strength of schedule in the league that going into this season. I think. I think the pick does have to be New Orleans Saints just to take the over based on strength of schedule. At least you pencil in 2 wins versus the Panthers, and you're gonna get you're gonna get the Eagles, Packers, and Chiefs out of the way early, and then it kind of opens up for them. I don't hate going over 7.5 for the Saints.
Yeah, I still got under the